Now for global business updates, Rotus Oddiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Dr. Abasi. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning,
Good morning, Rotus.
Money Monday. Good morning to all our viewers out there.
You're going to sell us also in the studio one day.
Business interests, we got to survive and pay salaries. Let's start with oil prices, which are kicking off to a high for 2025. So you look at Brent crude, coming down slightly, but still 73. West Texas Intermediate is really the story, touching a high that hasn't been seen since October of 2024. Nigeria's 2025 benchmark is always $75. So we get to some of the triggers that are being talked about for why oil is on the rise. There's a cold front, as we all know, that's been a cold front running through the United States. Also colder weather in Europe. So that is expected to drive demand for heating, which is going to, of course, it is expected to translate into demand for oil and so on and so forth. Then China's stimulus announcements, we've talked about it several times, the largest consumer of oil. If they manage to stimulate enough aggregate demand in enough industries, that will also pull oil upwards. And then we've got a report from Goldman Sachs saying that the incoming Trump administration is likely to place sanctions on Iran. There's been this back and forth thing between Iran and Trump. He's accused them of trying to assassinate him, this and that. There have been reports and so on and so forth. So he's expected to target them, and it's suggested that their output should fall about 3 to 350, maybe 400 barrels per day, bringing them down to about 3.25 million barrels per day or so. So pretty much that is taking supply off the market, which Goldman thinks will push oil prices up. So Asian markets, pretty bearish today. It's funny enough, save for the Kospi, where there's been all types of political turmoil, with them trying to arrest President for the Yule for his martial law that he declared not long ago. But we got a lot of purchasing managers index figures coming out for the Asia region. And besides the services sector in India and China climbing, we did see the expected purchasing managers index numbers not really fall in line with where expectations were. So still manufacturing weakness. We're going to get to Nippon in a second now, because Japan led losses across the Asian region, as you can see, down by 1.47%. Nippon Steel did fall in trading this morning. Japan just came back from their holidays. They were off on, I think, Thursday and Friday last week. You can see the Kospi is the only one. The Hang Seng down, China as well. China has been really weak to start off 2025. So let's get to Nippon Steel. We previewed this on Friday that Joe Biden was expected to basically block this deal. He is the first U.S. president to block a deal, a mergers and acquisition deal between Japan and the United States. And he did actually put out a statement. Let's run through those statements. Now, I mean, it was a long statement that the White House issued, but just to pick this out, he said there's credible evidence that leads me to believe that Nippon Steel's proposed acquisition of U.S. Steel threatens to impair the national security of the United States. Now, the Washington Post had an article out yesterday or Saturday that there's been division in Biden's cabinet over this. Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, I think Anthony Blinken said that this is shaky ground to block this deal on security concerns, and they don't think there was enough credible evidence there. But I think the U.S. Trade Representative, I think Catherine Tai, so she actually supported it. So there was a lot of division there. Japan is, I think, one of the highest foreign direct investment sources for the U.S. They hold a lot of U.S. debt. There have been security alliances between the two countries that have been strengthened. This is expected to ruffle further. So Nippon and U.S. Steel did put out a joint statement, and they're pretty upset, to say the least. Said it's shocking and deeply troubling that the U.S. government would reject a pro-competitive transaction that advances U.S. interests and treats an ally like Japan in this way. They continued further, saying that essentially, we believe that President Biden has sacrificed the future of American steel workers for his own political agenda. This move sends a chilling message to any company based in a U.S. allied country that is contemplating significant investment in the United States. They kept going further, saying that the president's statement and order do not present any credible evidence of a national security issue, making clear that this was a political decision. Following Biden's decision, we are left with no choice but to take all appropriate action to protect our legal rights. I think Taichida Imai, who is the president of Nippon Steel, who was Japanese television earlier this morning, Tadashi Imai, excuse me, he says our company has the right to be properly reviewed. The history of the review so far and the U.S. government's decision have not been properly reviewed. We are considering it. It was asked if they'll file a lawsuit, as one of the important options. I think we can take action, including announcing countermeasures without spending too much time. Japan's trade minister he also weighed in as well. This is Yoji Muto. He's the Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry. He says it is incomprehensible and regrettable that the Biden administration has made this kind of decision, citing national security concerns. The Japanese government has no choice but to regard this seriously. So, to say the least, this is going to cause, some ruffling of feathers between the relationships between the U.S. and Japan. We go to Europe. Giorgia Meloni was at Mar-a-Lago over the weekend to visit with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, who is going to be inaugurated, on the 20th? 2 Mondays from now. And there they are with the thumbs up sign. He says she's a great woman. She has taken Europe by storm. But beyond that, there was a deal that's being discussed. Bloomberg is reporting that Italy is looking to get SpaceX, which is, of course, Elon Musk's company, to put together a $1.6 billion deal for telecom security services, which would encrypt communications within the Italian government using SpaceX technology. It's a possible 5-year contract. It has been in talks since, I think, mid to late 2023, but some authorities look at the way Biden has pushed back on this deal with Nippon Steel now. Some authorities were worried that SpaceX would, but if the Italian government was to approve this deal, that would be to the detriment of local telecommunications carriers in Italy, who they claim could also provide the same services. And it would be the largest deal in Italy if that goes. So she actually came in to discuss the deal with Trump, and as you can see, Elon Musk is benefiting from these things if the deal should go through. It is still up in the air. Finally, in Nigeria, the Securities and Exchange Commission, remember when Arise News was in Casablanca, Morocco for the Africa Financial Industry Summit? We spoke with Dr. Momoti, who is the Director General. They're coming out and saying that they want to crack down on Ponzi schemes in 2025. One of the fallouts, unfortunately, from when economic times get tough is that people, unfortunately look for get-rich-quick schemes. They fall victim of them. So they're really trying to put awareness campaigns out there to make sure Nigerians are essentially, front and center and aware when it comes to this. And we've done it on the show several times. If a deal sounds too good to be true, there are people who tweet me and say, Rotus, what do you think of this deal, this and that, this interest rate? And I tell them, hey, be careful. So if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And check the SEC's website to see whether all these companies offering these deals are listed there. That's our update for today.
All right, thanks, Rotus. Going straight into the Nippon Steel, I saw the reaction from the U.S. Steel CEO, who called Joe Biden shameful and corrupt for blocking the deal. And I believe at some point in the statement, he also said that the Chinese Communist Party are dancing in their offices right now. Of course, this highlights the power play here, the geopolitical power play, versus... So U.S. Steel is in a tight place, and highly likely that without investment soon, a number of people are going to be laid off, and maybe a number of factories will also need to be shut down. And they're saying that, this is somebody who's come to save us, so you'd rather choose what you're calling national security, which is intangible to us, to all these jobs in Pittsburgh, I believe, that are most likely going to be lost. Whereas on the other hand, people are now saying that, we've always had questions about this Joe Biden relationship with China and how he seems to cozy up to the Chinese. And I was looking at a lot of the commentary where people were saying, well, we would have preferred the Japanese to the Chinese, So there's a lot of sentiment attached to it. But ultimately, the steel industry is, I feel it's such a strategic industry that it is of national security. And Donald Trump, if Joe Biden didn't veto it, Donald Trump was going to veto it in the next few weeks anyway. So I don't think there's much.
And just a quick point to what Vimbai's point there. When you think about steel, think about Ajaokuta Steel here in Nigeria. And what steel means for transportation, rail, vehicle manufacturing, weapons, and so on. So yeah, that's where the national security thing comes in, infrastructure and so on. So the point is that they're saying that if Nippon Steel just come up with this transaction, that they would actually reduce the amount of steel output from the United States and favor what's coming out of Japan. And if that was the case, by reducing steel output, you're now reducing infrastructure, weapons manufacturing, vehicles, and so on and so forth. So, big story there, and jobs as well, yeah.
All right, so talking about suppressing production in the home country in favor of a foreign entity would be what's happening in Italy at the moment, and the 1.5 billion euro potential deal for Starlink. a number of people are saying that Telecom Italia could possibly take up this deal, and that if Starlink does get that contract, then it would suppress production and hamper, already failing or distressed, telecommunications industry in Italy. So the
like
conversation,
Nigeria.
yeah, I was going to use that. I was going to use that example with Nigeria.
Yeah.
So no, but not in the way you're thinking.
No,
Not the high prices,
I
but
got you.
this is a clear example because this is following the Italian Prime Minister's visit to Donald Trump, far right, by the way. Let me mention, right-wing Italian Prime Minister.
No. I know how you waves her finger like that. Yeah, she waves her finger like that.
Italian Prime Minister. But the significance of this is the importance of how governments can facilitate trade between private industries, entities, and countries.
Yes.
And this is what we often ask for the Nigerian government, to provide an enabling environment, which, in fairness to this administration, there's been that, I remember the recent visit to Saudi Arabia, some private entities went there, and the Olam agro deal that happened with the Saudi Arabia counterpart, very good one there. But it just shows the power of government and the private sector. Even though a number of people are saying that Elon Musk might be benefiting, disproportionately to other businesses in the United States of America. But let's see how this pans out. Yeah. It's not yet clear-cut. Italy is still protesting that can they not find a local player to provide this service. But let's see if Elon Musk could get that very juicy contract for the next 5 years. Yeah.
Okay, a number of issues. First on Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel. U.S. Steel is a major strategic national asset for the Americans, but the company was not doing well. It needed to be revitalized. Hence, this acquisition deal, $14.3 billion with Nippon Steel of Japan. But it will need to be approved by government. So the U.S. Foreign Investment Committee, the Senate Committee on U.S. Foreign Investment in the Senate, looked at it. They could not reach a consensus. Having not reached a consensus, it was now left to the president to take a decision. So last week, President Biden decided to block that bill. He cited two things: national security and supply chains. Those were the two things in his statement. Now, Nippon Steel is saying, well, this is unfair to them, and they will go to the Supreme Court. So the matter is going to go to the court. Of course, U.S. Steel is also not happy with it. But if President Biden did not act, President Trump, anyway, on assumption of office, he has also made it very clear that he did not think that a strategic national asset like U.S. Steel should be taken over by the Japanese. That's that about that. As for oil, yes, Brent crude futures rose 0.2%, about $76 now. WTI rose 0.3%, about 74 now. But the three things you have identified them, but the most strategic ones, China, demand, because China is the largest consumer of petrol in the world. And last Friday, China, Beijing, as it is otherwise referred to, decided, to promise additional stimulus, particularly with treasury bonds to stimulate business investment. And the expectation is that there will be, more demand for oil. The second thing is climate, weather issues in the northern hemisphere. And that, the cold weather is likely to lead to more demand. This week, a number of critical things. We're going to have the December report of the Fed, U.S. Federal Reserve meeting, their last meeting, on Tuesday, tomorrow. We're going to have December jobs report on Friday. Now, this may give us clarity about the future of the U.S. economy, but it doesn't mean that it will affect the rate-taking decision in January, rather. And finally, in New York, they now have congestion charges, which may have implications in that region south of the Central Park. And it came into effect very early yesterday, Sunday morning, 5 a.m. their time, local time. And, Wall Street is going to be affected. Empire Park is going to be affected. But maybe it will encourage more people to take public transportation. But the implication for business and for individuals, the first city in the United States to have congestion charge. Thank you very much.